I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. I'm Roger Brown. I'm the president of Berklee College of Music, and we're delighted to be here with you. And we're going to do, this is an interesting event. I've never done an event like this. It's one part album release celebration, celebrating the music that you just heard, Shivoham, by our friend Chandrika Tandon. It's another part reflection on our mutual journeys in life in general, but especially for those of us who labor in the music industry to try to reconnect with what it was that made us want to do that in the first place, because sometimes the spirit can be taken out of us as we toil in this difficult space that lets us do the things we love and believe in, but sometimes can be dispiriting. And then it's another part, just general reflection and connection as human beings. So if we pull this off, we'll have a conversation among us and then with all of you, and we'll have a little bit of music, and we'll all leave with a little bit lighter sense of who we are and a rededication to whatever our journey is, to doing it with all the passion and ferocity that an ephemeral life like this deserves. And speaking of ephemeral lives, I think it would be great to begin this with a moment of reflection. We've just lost a lot of lives in Las Vegas, many from the music industry, and I'm told many from Los Angeles. The island of Puerto Rico, that's given the world so much amazing music, has been absolutely devastated. We've had storms in Houston and Florida, and then we have more dislocation in Syria and the Congo than the world has experienced since World War II. So whatever issue is on your mind, we'll use the next musical interlude as a moment just to reflect on that, and then we'll get ourselves back together and talk a little bit further with some of our guests who I'll introduce to you. So I'm not going to introduce them first. I'm going to have them come. I'm going to let the music speak for itself, and then I'll tell you more about who they are. So please welcome.
Set up these various contraptions. Nothing seems to go on exactly right, but I'm sure it will. The apple has to blossom.
Yes.
It has its time. So you can think about Puerto Rico and Las Vegas. And the prayer that I'm going to start out with is actually in the album, but it's an unplugged version we're going to do now with Krishna, Kenny Warner, and Pedro Stout. It basically says, open my heart, Mother Divine, I want to let it shine. I just want to feel the compassion in my heart. Just help me feel that. There's lots of words in Sanskrit that talk about that, but that's what the song is. Now there's a little piece at the end of it. By the way, how many musicians in the room? That's kind of a dumb question, but how many singers in the room? All right. How many would-be singers in the room? and all right. So I think that we get to about 80% of our group or more, and probably some shy ones aren't acknowledging their singing abilities. So we'll just try to have you all sing a line, and then we'll all try to sing with you eventually. But we'll start out with a prayer. Was that something someone said?
That's a tambourine?
Yeah, so you're going to hear the drone.
Yes.
प्रतीकाशम् चन्द्रकोटि समप्रभम् तन्मध्ये निकरं सूक्ष्मम् ब्रह्मरूप व्यवस्थितम् ओंकारं परमानन्दं सदैव सुखसुन्दरी सिद्धलक्ष्मी मोक्षलक्ष्मी आदिलक्ष्मी नमोऽस्तु ते सिद्धलक्ष्मी मोक्षलक्ष्मी आदिलक्ष्मी नमोऽस्तु ते सर्वमङ्गल माङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थ साधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणी नमोऽस्तु ते नमोऽस्तु ते नमोऽस्तु ते नमोऽस्तु ते नमोऽस्तु ते I'd invite you to sing, open this heart, Mother Divine. 1, 2, 3. Open this heart, I'm gonna let it shine, shine. I'm gonna let it shine, shine. Open this heart, Mother Divine. I'm gonna let it shine, shine. Just all of you. You can do better.
I bow to the compassion in all of you, and I bow to the compassion in myself. Thank you all for joining me. Now I invite my brave and fearless leader, friend, the great Roger Brown.
That's a very nice way to start. And thank you all for being here. And if this goes the way we hope, that will just be the beginning. So I want to introduce a lot of people to you, but I first want to thank a few people. Our representative here in Los Angeles, Peter Gordon, Mirik Vana, and Clint Valadares, who helped put this thing together. Jeff Greenberg and his wonderful staff here at the Village. Every time I'm at the Village, there's something amazing happening, and it's just such a great space. So thank you all for hosting us. I want to welcome a couple of Berklee trustees. Charles Hirschhorn, his wonderful wife Cynthia are here. We have David Sloan. Where's David? David's over here, who's just happened to be here from Boston. And from our Presidential Advisory Council, we have Nelson Huang and his lovely wife, Phoebe. Thank you all for being here. So let me just introduce the people you're going to be talking to and hearing from tonight. First, Pedro Eustache, on a variety of flutes, is originally from Venezuela.
Nobody's perfect.
And was, I think you told me, in the very first incarnation of the National Symphonic Orchestra that became known as El Sistema, and has produced not only Gustavo Dudamel, but lots of amazing musicians. He has been on tour recently with the Hans Zimmer production of Hans's film music, as well as the Game of Thrones production by Berklee alum Ramin Djawadi. And he's a cat. This guy plays not only traditional, he studied in Switzerland and in France at CalArts, and then he studied where you really need to study, which is with great mentor musicians around the world. So it's going to be good to have you as part of this. And originally, yeah. And one, pardon me, but one cool fact, his name Eustache, he's originally of Haitian descent. I guess not originally. I think we're all East African originally. But somehow he ended it.
That's a scientific fact.
Yes, exactly. But Eustache is a name of a Frenchman who discovered the Eustachian tube. It was not the other way around, which I think is just an interesting fun fact. Next is my amazing and wonderful friend and colleague, Kenny Werner. When I got the gig at Berklee, there were a handful of people I was really hoping I would get to meet, and Kenny was one of them. I was a big Peter Erskine fan, and through Peter had discovered Kenny's music and Joe Lovano's music. And then I'd also read the book Effortless Mastery, which I hope you have read, and if you have not, that's a homework assignment for the coming week. There you go. It is a brilliant book. And even if you're not a musician, you will learn something from it, and you'll be a better leader, manager, creator, entrepreneur, whatever it is you're trying to do. And Kenny has graciously proposed and agreed to run the Effortless Mastery Institute at Berklee that works not only with students, but Berklee faculty, because we all get stuck. We all get in our own way. And part of what Kenny's trying to do is use his own personal experience to sort of clear the underbrush so we can be who we're destined to be. So that's Kenny Werner. And then the woman of the hour, Chandrika Tandon. We are blessed that Chandrika is also a member of the Berklee Presidential Advisory Council, but she's so much more than that. She is the vice chairman of the NYU board and helped create the NYU Tanton School of Engineering, named for her family. She was the first Indian American partner at the consulting firm McKinsey & Company, which is sort of the gold standard of consulting firms. She grew up in Chennai, middle-class family, with a grandfather who we're going to talk about later, who I think imparted to her not only a sense of what was possible in life, but a sense that she had a destiny and she could do whatever she chose to do in life. So here's this person who's been wildly successful in the business world and then somehow gives herself permission to create this music that you're going to take home and listen to, that is recorded and produced and imagined and performed at the absolute highest level. So I think of her as the Indian American version of Charles Ives. If you're a fan of Charles Ives, you probably know that he was a composer in his young life, went to Yale University, and became the most powerful insurance executive in the United States at the turn of the last century, when that was the equivalent of being Jeff Bezos or Steve Jobs. He invented estate planning, which I hope many of you will need to use. My wish for all Berklee alumni is that you'll be successful enough to need to do some estate planning. And then he decided to become a composer and became America's most seminal composer of 20th century music. So somehow or another, Charles Ives gave himself permission to do that, and somehow or another, Chandrika gave herself permission to do that. And it's just magnificent and beautiful, and we're so honored that you're sharing your music with us and that some of us, like Kenny and others, got to be part of it. So, to kick this off, that's the question I wanted to pose first. I think what allows hyper-creative people to create is first and most importantly that they give themselves permission to have the audacity to think that they have something that the world wants to hear. I was talking earlier to an alum who's doing some work with Elon Musk. What gives a kid from an abusive family in South Africa who goes to an unheard of university in the United States the permission to create Tesla and SpaceX? I mean, Tesla is audacious enough. SpaceX, my God, who would ever have imagined that he could pull that off? And all the things he's done, and you think of it in the artistic world, the musical world. And so I wanted you to just reflect for a minute on, like, how did you have the courage to say, okay, I've done all these other things, now I'm going to record a 3-album collection of music about my life's journey?
I wouldn't call it courage. This album, and I've done 3 before this album's actually been a musical expression of a very tortured journey. A tortured journey that took me 4 steps forward, 10 steps back, and sometimes 2 steps forward and then 5, sometimes more steps forward. The net was positive. But it's about 17, 18 years ago, my life was good. And, I didn't have any third world problems. I had first world problems. I had my family was good, my business was good. And suddenly I started to ask these questions. Thank God for that. I started to ask these questions about what is success? Why was I born? What if I died tomorrow? I mean, it's not necessarily in a morbid sense that these questions started, but they really started in the sense of saying, well, is this all? Why, if I died tomorrow, would I have spent a happy life? I was working with CEOs and bankers and financial boards all over the world. And I was working nonstop 24/7 and with my family, trying to do it all and doing nothing. But really struggling with this question. And then I had to think about how do you become happy? What is happiness? Because I was stressed, I was working hard, and that question came down to music made me happy. It wasn't that I had this great, okay, I want to become a guru or I want to go find enlightenment. None of this. It's just music made me really happy. And that started like a snowball almost. And the universe is very, very brilliant because it just, when you have a very manifest desire which is so deep-rooted, the universe makes it happen. So teachers came by. I mean, I would say, I'm making it sound trivial. It was anything but that, because living in New York, and I wanted to study Indian music at the highest levels, which is impossible to study in New York. Because the masters, to start with, nobody wants to take a 50-year-old or a 40-year-old at that time and teach you, because they've already at 40, they've eaten them and chewed them up and thrown them out if they weren't good, and they take them when they're 4. And you have to, you can't pay a teacher to teach you. You had to really do this. You had to devote yourself. And I couldn't. I still had a life. I had a business, a company, I had boards. So this became a journey of such a discovery, of finding myself, because Indian music, one of the important things, and we started to get into it a little, when you get into the highest forms of Indian music, you cannot find your note unless your mind is in a centered spot. You just cannot find it. And so I never found my note. And so I have spent hours, almost 2 hours in a class, where I have just taken my tonic scale of A or G sharp and shook and shook and shook and didn't quite find. Most people would think I'm pretty much in tune. But to find that sur, that what we call the core of the sur, is really not about the music. It's about finding the pinpointed sense of yourself. So that was the journey. And there's many more elements to this journey. But finding that pinpointed element of myself suddenly started to create the journey to the light, the journey to be my best self. I will say there's lots of details in between which are not that interesting to anyone, but not even to me anymore. But it was, the rewards have been magnificent, beyond. The details of my life haven't changed, but my whole prism with which I view that is transformed. And that's what I consider a gift. So it isn't courage. I opened my heart to accept the gift the universe had to give me.
Beautiful. That is so consistent with some of what you talk about, Kenny, where you ask students to not play a whole bunch of notes, but to play a note. So do you want to talk a little bit about effortless mastery and maybe the relationship between what Chandrika just talked about and the way you were focused on that approach?
Well, the thing that popped in my mind when she talked about centered to find her note, that center is where the highest music comes from. But often we're distracted by the pseudo-importance of the instrument. We actually demean ourselves just to play the instrument well. And it becomes more important to play the instrument well than to find the center. And the problem is, well, not the problem, but when you don't, when you just want to play well, then you're attached. And when you don't play well, then you're more attached. And then it becomes a preoccupation with how do I sound? And how do I sound now? How do I sound 10 minutes later? And the more you think about it, the harder it is to find. And then there can be a downward spiral. And this can easily happen by educating yourself, by going to school. And what's been mind-blowing about Berklee is they're so dedicated that in a lot of schools it would be a subject, it's like the guy in Harry Potter, he who must not be named. It's a subject that must not be spoken of. The fact that a lot of people go on a downward spiral by trying to go to school and educate themselves, And Berklee, in many people, not just me, but many people are so dedicated to helping them find that center. And, so when you said that, I thought to myself, with that center, without that center, 1,000 notes is not enough. With that center, one note is more than you'll ever need. And when a person plays one note from that center, nobody is bored. And when they're not in that center, 1,000 notes just make you sort of tune out. So I think it's a subject that's taking more and more importance as people, and I certainly for myself, are hungry to know themselves. What's behind this illusion. You're a policeman and you're a musician but what's behind it all? And music can only reveal that if the musician, like Chandrika, that's their priority. And it's a very high purpose for music, so thanks for letting me share.
Now, Roger, you can't sort of play just the moderator and get away with this, okay? So you have a lot to say, because Roger's got this unique position of both being a musician, having been a successful business person, a very successful business person, served in the Peace Corps, and now is training hundreds of thousands of young minds to operate in the world in a very different model. I mean, but the Berkeley that Roger has taken and run is a different Berkeley than where it was 11 years ago, and it will become a different place in 11 years. So I'd like you to talk about that same question that you asked the two of us, but finding the you.
My journey is that I was I grew up in a little town in Georgia and went to an even smaller college in North Carolina, and then I went into other parts of the world, and I was always like the best drummer wherever I was. And then I came to Berkeley, and every entering freshman is better than I am. In fact, when I got the job, I decided to be fearless and to go audition like all the entering students do, and just feel what it's like to be a brand new student at a school of music and to go audition where you can hear what's coming out of the other rooms. And these are the people who are going to be the future Vinnie Colaiutas and Harvey Masons and J.R. Robinsons and Smitty Smiths and Tane Watts and Kendrick Scotts of the world, and they're already really, really good. And it's terrifying, and it leads to what Kenny talks about in his book. He calls it music school disease, which is that music school, if done poorly, can actually make you hate the thing you used to love. And even though you may get better in some way technically, you may get worse as a musician who can really express yourself, especially if you lose that love of it. But my personal journey is I got, after college, I grew up in this little southern town, and my schools were desegregated when I was in the 7th grade. I went to segregated elementary school. And I had two role models as politicians as a young person. One was a guy I hope you don't remember named Lester Maddox, who was the governor of the state of Georgia, who ran a restaurant where he gave people axe handles so they could chase away black customers if they tried to eat there. And the other was Martin Luther King. And as a young 13, 14-year-old, it was pretty easy to say, which one of these people do I want to emulate? And so I went off after college to teach in Kenya because I thought it would be interesting to be a white Southerner in an African country, and I taught math and physics there, and it totally changed the trajectory of my life, took me away from trying to pursue music in a more serious way, and I ended up working in Cambodia and Thailand and Sudan and lots of other places, and then my wife and I started a company together, but I always did music everywhere I was. I played in a cover band in Thailand, and I just went to a Billy Joel concert, and they played You May Be Right. You remember that song? You may be right. And they sang it purely phonetically. They could not speak any English. And they sounded just like Billy Joel, but they had no idea what they were saying. So I always did music, but I never embraced it the way, if I'd gone a different path, I might have. And then, lo and behold, Berkeley was looking for a president, and they hired me. And that's the moment I realized all these things that looked like detours were really part of my journey. By working in Kenya and Cambodia and Sudan and Thailand, I learned how to work across cultures, and we have students from 101 countries at Berkeley. And I can usually relate to someone no matter where they come from because of these experiences. Secondly, Berkeley is all about trying to be a good educational place, and I'd been a high school math teacher in Kenya, and I had started an organization that runs child care centers. That's where I got the idea of the 3-minute warning. When you're dealing with preschoolers, you always give them a heads up. Okay, you got 3 minutes to finish up your drawings, and then we're going to go wash our hands and get ready for the next thing. So, we're all just grown-up preschoolers. And then I realized that this intense interest and passion about trying to overcome racism in our country Berkeley's the perfect place for that because we're the place that embraced jazz and the music of the African cultural diaspora, and that's what we teach, and that's the core of why people want to be there. And then finally, I'd been an entrepreneur, and Berkeley is a wildly entrepreneurial place that believes in creating new stuff, like a campus in Valencia, Spain, or the online school. So my message to Berkeley students is, you don't know what your journey is, and they teach you that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And as a mathematician, I can tell you that's only true in a two-dimensional world. In a multi-dimensional world, the shortest distance between a straight line is often zigging and zagging and moving up and down. And that's the fastest way to get to where you want to go. And if you try to go the straight course, you probably won't get to where you where you thought you were going to go. So I wanted to ask Pedro a question. You were launched out of what became El Sistema as like a classical musician in the Western European tradition, despite your own background as both a Venezuelan and Haitian roots. And then I think you've been on a path of discovery of all this other music, all these other instruments in the world. So it seems to me you've got something to share with us about your journey.
Well, to begin with, I'm the oddball here. Thank you. I am so honored to sit next to His Majesty, Kenny right here, and to Roger, the president, and then Chandrika has this incredible music and this incredible story. And I'm going like, what am I doing here? Thanks for allowing me to be here. I didn't go to Berkeley. Please don't hold that against me. I went to CalArts. I've been in Los Angeles for 29 years. Yet somehow Clint said something really good. He was the one that called me. You're right there filming me. He said, I feel I've known you for my whole life or something like that, many years. And it felt like that coming here. By the way, this is a wonderful exercise and submission for me, and dependency to a higher power, and in humility. To have the audacity or the craziness to say yes, to play with people you've never played, music that I had never rehearsed before. We did a few minutes this afternoon, and not many of them. We didn't do a Not Bite Of, so that's coming. We did one song. And to be able, thank you, Clint, we need to talk. And Peter reassuring me and everything, it's just one of those things that I have learned to let go, literally. I don't want to depress anybody. I'm going to say something really heavy, really. I'm serious. No, it's not a joke. It's true, what I'm going to say. When your beautiful little daughter of 3 years dies in your arms of brain cancer, you need to find your center to keep living. My wife and I lost our daughter 29 years ago. She was 3 years and 9 months. And I'm a Jesus freak. Before committing suicide, he came and rescued me from a very, very dark place. Very, very, very dark place. Yet I understood something incredible. In spite of those things, when you're centered, when your fundamentals are right, you can survive that and thrive. Jesus, for me, is more real than anything I can live with. And as a great follower of the great Johann Sebastian Bach, who's the greatest musician that ever existed, with all the respect to other cultures and everything, I've studied them all. For me, it's quantum leap. He said that music existed to glorify God and to sublimate, to elevate the human soul. And as a student of musical phenomenology, I've realized that we lose a lot of that when we go to schools by virtue of exactly what you all said. In my case, was easy. Since I was very little, I wasn't good at anything else. I'm very atypical but have a sense of stubbornness. That is my second gift, probably. Some people call it determination. I call it like it is. I might be in Hollywood in LA, but I'm like from New York. I call it like it is. And I have an incredible wife. And what happened is I have followed the calling I've heard in my heart. You need to understand that to be a musician or to be an artist is a call to the irrational. We're not normal. If you're young, you want to be a musician, get ready. Because of what this world says, or the values in this world and the times we're going. We go completely against that. But then we hear, I get touched by your music, I hear that, and I go to another place. My definition of music, which is extremely arrogant to try to define music. After studying musical phenomenology, I got to this place. For me, music is sonic art, vehicle into transcendence. And I have felt transcendence tonight with Chandrika's music and with Kenny's playing. I am the musical product of my elder brother's genius musical vision, Maestro Michel Eustache. I am a product, since I was 3 and 4, he got me into wonderful, many different disciplines of music. Benjamin Britten, a Guide for Orchestral Youth, Peter and the Wolf, and all these things. And then he put me from super cheesy jazz things to Eric Dolphy. And as a kid, and then he put me into medieval and Renaissance music, and I was playing my first recording. I'm 58 now. I did when I was 12. And I was playing recorder in a recorder quintet doing Renaissance and medieval music. This is in, Caracas, Venezuela. But I had a brother that has this vision that went beyond what the normal thing around was, and the traditional Venezuelan music and all this stuff. And then he had Ravi Shankar music as well. And holy moly. He didn't let me give up music. He said, you hate the violin, but you're good for this thing, so you need to pick something else. I heard a beautiful song by a wonderful rock and roll group called King Crimson, called I Talk to the Wind. And I heard that most beautiful, beautiful, haunting, amazing flute solo. And I said, so what my brother does, he's a brilliant flautist. What he does, which is a boring world music thing, I can do in rock and roll. I want to play that. That's how I got into the flute. Then I need to learn how to maneuver in this instrument. I got into classical music very seriously. I never intended to have a career. That is an accident. So the beautiful thing, which we probably have in common, is the result of our journey is a concatenation, a combination of elements that if you see them individually, they're completely incongruent, but yet at the end make a lot of sense. I have become, by God's grace, after pursuing all these things and all the beautiful elements my brother instilled on me since I was very little, and he was amazing. He literally motivated me so good. You're good, you're gonna do good. Keep doing this. You believe in those things. I became a member of at the time was Orquesta Nacional Juvenil de Venezuela. I was the proud member of Dr. Jose Antonio Abreu, first incarnation of the Simon Bolivar Symphony Orchestra. I still have my original founder thing. I was the first piccolo. In fact, the amazing thing is my audition for the symphony orchestra to play was to play Benjamin Britten, Guide for Youth, and the fugue. Starts with the piccolo. And I played the heck out of this thing, and everybody, whoa, because it seems the piccolo before sucked. So he made it easy for me. So the thing is, after that, I discovered jazz when I went to Paris to study there with a scholarship from the Venezuelan government. Before that, I married a Venezuelan lady of Russian, Ukrainian, Argentinian descent. We lived in Paris. I studied in Basel afterwards. Now I live in LA, so I'm a multicultural weird thing. It's good for LA. We feel natural here. The thing is, as a consequence of my DNA, my dad was black, My mom was white. They spoke Spanish with an accent. And we had a whole other culture at home. So in that way also, I believe I was prepared for multi-directionality. And that's the way I define myself. I took this from Jack DeJohnette. I'm a multi-directional soloist, and actually a multi-dimensional soloist. And coming back to the end of this thing, because I'm talking too much. I didn't mean to kidnap this conversation. Please forgive me. Many years ago, I came to a conclusion. I said, I will never forget what motivated me when I was 9 that I started playing the flute. This is 49 years ago, the recorder. The feeling I had, why I experienced, I will not let the fright I had with all those terrible Conservatoire Hector Berlioz, super duper traditional classical Western music thing that wanted to make me hate music. By the way, that's when I discovered Raviji live there in Paris. It was a fresh breath air. It's like, wow. I felt liberated by this thing. So I decided I will never lose that connection with that initial thing. No matter what the classical Western people think, many times they're waiting for you to make a mistake. Instead of coming to get brought to another place in music, they come to hear you fail. How stupid is that? How contradictory is that? Then, in jazz, we have elements in African American music that Western classical music lost. Just complete oxymoron. Mozart would have killed the changes. So did Bach. In fact, there's a Mozart thing, one of his C minor fantasies. There are 251s in mind that literally have flat 9s and sharp 11 and flat 13th and everything. If you hear Bach variation Goldberg, there are like 9 or 10 of them which are absolutely perfectly in flamenco bulería, and they rematan in the 10 like in flamenco. So there's something here in music that goes beyond cultures, beyond geographies, beyond ethnicities. And that's why it's my pleasure to have followed that beautiful thing, more than a thing, guiding me in spite of making completely irrational decisions. After being a very strong soloist as a classical musician, I decided I can't do this anymore. There's more to music than this. I completely gave up. I was first flute solo in the Simon Bolivar Symphony Orchestra, and I went to CalArts, and it was horrible. My first improvisations were, I hope nobody videotaped those things. But by God's, I'm telling you, but by God's grace, then things kept. So it's so powerful to be able to navigate and to know Mozart's beautiful stories, energy patterns behind his structures, not just the notes, and then be able to navigate through giant steps and to be able to play Nadbairov. So here, take the microphone away from me quick. My point is, I could not design this. I just followed what I felt I was guided to follow, and I ended up in a place that is unique, and I have no competition by God's amazing grace.
So back to Chandrika for a moment. I happen to know a little bit about her personal saga. And I think for all of us, there are probably some people who inspired us along the way. Your brother, I know a little bit about Kenny's journey, but I think in Chandrika's case, a lot of it came from your grandfather. And I just wonder if, for you to get to where the music comes from for you, I think a lot of it comes from him. So do you want to talk about him a little bit? And then one other topic that I have noticed when I travel to India is that in the United States, we're a very bifurcated people. You can be a business person and you're supposed to be a certain kind of person, or you can be a spiritual yogi, but it's very hard to be both. But in India, it seems like there's more acceptance of the idea of being both things at once. And I hear so many Indian business people talk about their spiritual path, their meditation routines, and it's just very rare to hear an American CEO, American-born CEO do that. So maybe talk a little bit about your grandfather and then the subsequent path you've been on.
So I'm going to take, having heard Pedro with sort of goggle-eyed sort of wonder, listening to his whole story. My story was nothing like that. I sang before I could speak when I was little, when I won a lot of competitions in my little Chennai. Chennai at that time was a little more than a village. It wasn't the center of the knowledge economy. This was a tiny little place, and I come from a very simple, very middle-class family where arts wasn't the main focus. They really were trying to get me married at the age of 16, and so my mother wanted to give me enough skills that a good boy would want to marry me, and that was the main goal. So they wanted to teach me to sing, to dance, to cook. I learned all of that, by the way. I can't cook very well, and I was a terrible dancer. But I was a reasonably good singer, but that was only for 2 years. So this was but the one thing that happened is we had a radio. And in that time, there were 2 radio stations that played from 5 a.m. in the morning until 10 at night. Now, so we weren't separated by jazz and classical and Indian and Western and Bollywood. We just heard whatever was on that radio station. So music would play all the time. Our radio would be on because we didn't have a tape recorder, we didn't have a spool player, we didn't have anything. We just had these 2 radio stations. One was news, you'd switch back and forth. So by 10 years of my being there, I could sing every song that was written by every sort of Europop, not too much Broadway musicals. That didn't come to India so much, not to Chennai. But everything else, jazz pieces, classical pieces. Now, I didn't know I knew all that, so you tell me a Beatles tune, Woodstock, the movie was shown in the one local theater. I saw it 47 times because you could see it, 47 times because you could see it continuously. So this was the way I am. And because it was a continuous theater, so they would play, it's I guess a 4-hour run or a 3-hour run, and they would run from 11 in the morning until 10 o'clock. So all the holidays I would go and watch it. And I wanted teeth like Richie Haven, I would paint a tooth. So it was a very big thing for me. And this would go on. And then my grandfather, my mother thought no pedigreed Indian woman who was 15 and single was ever allowed to go out of the house at all. I mean, she left to me, and I was the oldest. The rest of my family had it very easy. But my grandfather basically said to me, you can be anything you wanted to be. And you've got to understand where I was. We talk of a village in Tennessee. I was in a village in India. We didn't have an internet. We didn't have a phone in our house. We had one radio station, which my mother hijacked. She believed in it, but we would just let her, whenever she was cooking, we would get to play. And this is how the musical influences happen. Now, years later, when my daughter was playing classical music, and she's a really good classically trained pianist, she would be playing the minuets. I say, oh, I know the tune, and I know the entire tune of the minuets because I've heard it. I had no idea who had played it. I didn't know, I'd heard Bach, I'd heard of the name, but I didn't know. But I probably have a fairly good repertoire of Bach and all of the pieces that were done. And then over the years, I stopped singing for most of my life. I stopped singing for a variety of reasons, which were part of my own journey of understanding myself. I didn't feel good enough. I was always surrounded by great musicians. I didn't have the confidence to sing. And I was very good at other things. I topped my school, I topped everything I did. So I was very strongly in the business world. And years later, this whole epiphany, and really this crisis that I went through about 15, 18 years ago, was in fact saying, I need to sing to survive. I need to sing to be happy. So I didn't learn any music. And that moment in time, in my 40s, I'm desperately seeking music, but I can't get rid of everything else. And this was and I wasn't trying to be a spiritual anything. I didn't even know what spiritual was. I mean, you learned rituals, religion, faith, all of that, but that wasn't what drove me. I literally wanted to find myself through music. And when I found music, I found myself. There's this most beautiful expression that one of my teachers told me. And it's in Sanskrit, or it's actually in Hindi. Jab main tha, tab hari nahi. When I was there, the spirit was missing. Ab hari hai, main nahi. Now the spirit is taken over, and I'm not there anymore. And this teacher would make me start every class because he saw how insecure and screwed up I was in my mental state, because I would cringe to even sing some of the notes. And basically, the other thing which I took away, and this gets into spirituality, it's a broader point than spirituality. How many of you think of yourselves as perfectionists? Just put up, come on, don't be shy to put up your hands. There's a lot of perfectionists out here. Yeah, have you tortured yourselves about being perfectionist? Yes, there. We want to do our best, and it's never good enough. We're working harder and harder and harder. We want to get better. Yes? Sounds familiar? Or am I in a solo person of one here? Yeah, okay, good. I have a double hand out there. No, but the whole notion of perfection for me has been redefined. And that is a spiritual path. It's basically, we are perfect. What we did today was perfect. It doesn't matter it wasn't whether the notes were right. And this is not what I would have said 5 years ago even. It's this moment's perfect. We are abundance, and we are here to reclaim our own abundance and pass that abundance on and radiate that to all of you. And in that spirit that we all look at our own abundance. And this to me is the journey. This to me is what Shivoham, the quest is. And we talk about business and India and so on. I've got to say, first thing, I've lived outside of India for the last 40 years. So I've lived in America. I'm American. I have a huge history in India. But I work with the CEOs and the boards of the largest companies. I'm, in the Lincoln Center board. God knows, you name a board, I'm on it. So I'm not really in touch with the Indian businessmen. I have the roots, but that's not where it's from. But I will tell you, the big difference that's happened to me in the last 5 years in particular. 10 years ago, I started to sign every letter I wrote, love, light, laughter. Love, light, laughter. I started to sign it because I wanted to remind myself, that's my affirmation. I want to be in a place I wasn't anywhere in a place of love all the time. Forget it. Some days I would be, many times I wouldn't be. Light, I wanted to say there's a place of radiance I want to be in. And laughter, life ultimately is about joy. That's why I started to sign it. Initially, I will never forget the chairman of one of the largest law firms in the country, he's like anytime anybody gets taken over in any institution, they call this guy. And he's one of my best friends. He wrote me, and he and I serve on a board together. He happened to be the chairman of the board I was serving on. He wrote to me and he said, are you sure this is the kind of signature you want to have in all your business communication? What is with this love, light, laughter business? I said, that's how I want to talk about it. And I really didn't pay much attention to what he said. 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. Hugs. Okay, hugs, that's nice. A year later, love and hugs. Okay, nice. Now his mails back are love, light, laughter, back to you. Okay, so he couldn't come up with his own original version of it. But the next best thing is that he's got love, light, laughter, back to you. I'm happy with that. What is happening, and I don't actually agree with you, Roger, that we don't talk about it. I think we are just naturally here a much more reticent community because we think there's a woo-woo sense to talking about the spirit, or it's hijacked by faith. It's not necessary. It could be all of those things. But I will say in the last few years, I've gotten to know all of the practices of different people. People keep them quiet. And I think people's compassionate acts, you start to notice them much more. You start to notice what people do. We talk of gurus and teachers. There isn't this one guru that sits out there. There are gurus everywhere. Because once you begin to look at the light, all you're looking at is the light of everybody here. And there are everyday acts of grace and everyday acts of radiance that are happening all around us. We just don't look at it that way.
So, wonderful. So, I think we're going to play another track from the music, which would be a nice transition, and then maybe see if you all have questions or thoughts. So maybe we don't have time for everyone, but we'd love to get you involved a little bit. But should we listen to something else? And why don't you set it up for us?
So this is one, in Indian music, we have a lot of rules. It's a very rule-based system. So one of the training processes is that you sometimes have to work with 5 notes. The scale is 5 notes. So the pentatonic scale, many of you are familiar with, right? Sa, da, 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 da. One scale. So in this particular piece, I'm just going to play you a 2-minute extract of it. And I just wanted you to get an idea of what the kinds of things we've done to bring different influences together. In this one, the scale I've used is a pentatonic scale. But not the major pentatonic. Da, re, da, 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 da. Can you try that? Da, re, da, 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 da. One more time. It's not quite there. Da, 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 da. And you work back. Ra, 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 ra. Yes? So now, let's assume you're allowed to only sing these 5 notes. You can go up and down the scale, pick your tonic, but in those 5 notes, you will have to perform for about an hour and a half. Yes, that is what the masters do. And that is why we spend hours learning on a scale. So there are different ways you can play with it. You can play with rhythms. You can play with what we call, kansurs, which is sa, re. So you can take notes from other notes. You can glide. You can go with speed. You can go with different kinds of beats. So in this case, in this song, I'm just going to show you a composition where we actually took that, and I'm just going to play you a 2-minute version of it. This is a longer song. But we took a 10-beat version. So 10 beats, and you can count. And the tune sort of goes, and I'm giving you the structure so you can get the piece more. Sa, re, ma, pa, ni, sa, ni, pa, ma, re, sa. So basically we use the notes Om Namah Shivaya. Those 5 notes are meant to be the 5 elements of the body. And the more you chant them, they're supposed to destroy the bondages. It's called the song of destruction, to take away the attachments, because the premise is that we are all tightly bandaged in a lot of stuff, and that if you can loosen those bandages, your radiance can shine through. So that's the philosophy. And so this is Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Count 5, count 5s and count in 5s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah 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 Shivaya, Om Namah 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 Shivaya, Om Namah 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 Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. And you can play with endless ways of creating rhythms, breaking up the 10 into 2 to 4, 2 to 6, 2, 5, 5. 2. So there's divisions of beats, there's divisions of, and we've done in this track, I'm just going to play 2 minutes, we have something like 143 percussion tracks. Every drummer that played on it went insane. And so I couldn't use all of it. So I think I could do 2 more mixes of just tracks we haven't used. So can you just play, can you just lead into this? And you'll hear some of what I spoke to you about.
Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya.
I should just tell you a small vignette. We recorded this, the strings entirely in Abbey Road with the London musicians, many of them, about 60 of them. And we did this for 3 days. I mean, we had 3 or 4 days of recording time. The 4th day, many of the first violinists, the first cellos, all of them came to us and said, could we just have another session because we want to go back home and practice this and do this just right because none of us are happy with what we did. So this, I think, was a first for what happened to us during the process. So the next day, we actually took an extra day in British Grove Studios just to record this part of this song, just for this song. It took us all the time. But that was, I wanted to share this with you. But this, we've only used 5 notes. Would you imagine that that's what it is? It's just 5 notes. But then the rhythm complexities are high. And so that was part of this global journey for creativity, for us to be able to bring all these influences. The first one, you heard the Gregorian chant coming together with an Indian raga. And that's what this is about, breaking all these world boundaries. Because there are so many similarities, but we just have to know enough to look for them. If we all sit in our bubbles, how can we look at other bubbles?
How many of you could count all that and repeat it back to? I saw some of the Berkeley people say, I almost got it, do it again. Beautiful. Oh, let's see what you want to say. Let me ask you to try to just keep your question short. A useful tip is to try to end with a question mark, or make a short comment. So who would like to say something? And please just speak up. We won't try to use a mic. Alex.
Alexander from the Berkeley alumni this year, and I was wanted to ask all of you who seem to be very, who have reached a very deep place of where your music comes from. I feel like in today's society, technology like that, it's so easy to get distracted.
Yeah.
What's happening today, or what happened last week, or what's happening around the world. And if you could just speak a little bit about how you maintain your center with the distractions of the world, and how you kind of limit those distractions into your life so you can continue on your path.
Beautiful question. And let me say, the one thing that has really changed in the world is our capacity to be distracted. I mean, it's always been a challenge, but man, the ways that we have invented to distract ourselves are just enormous. And let me also say, Alexander he's a guy who knows how to make it happen. You led tours of Berklee students to Japan and to Africa, and just dreamed it all up and did it. So whatever you're doing, you should keep doing that. But Chandrika told me a story of how virtually every one of these melodies came to her during meditation. So why don't you take that one and speak about it?
This has really been a life-changing experience for me, going into meditation and finding meditation as a tool to find myself and to quiet myself. In fact, this happened in the previous album. At 3 a.m. in the morning, I woke up thinking about all the melodies. But in this particular one, it's so much deeper. Every one of the songs, the synchronicities, all came through meditation. And look, I'm as type A as they come.
Yes.
I am
That's
at,
true.
coming from the business world, I literally, I restructured mega companies. This is what I do for a living, and I'm not as a musician. So for me, I'm not a woo-woo type that suddenly says, oh my God, let me go Om in a place. That's not it. It literally changed my life. I went to a 10-day meditation where I wanted to really go deep and go into silence. On the 6th day of that meditation, where I was so quiet, I heard the entire song, the last song which we did with the Soweto Gospel Choir. The music, the sounds, the words, how it should come together. And I didn't have the virtuosity to write it down. It was getting downloaded to me, but I didn't know. I needed enough musical skills to be able to process it. And that's where, if we can and that doesn't happen all the time, because over 10 years or whatever, I've got 12 songs which have now come together. But to me, quieting your mind is really critical. And people say, well, prayer and asking for whatever. What I've been told is that prayer is when you're asking the divine for something. Meditation is when you're quieting yourself down and listening to the divine give you instructions. And the divine is out there giving us a lot of instructions. And you just need to quiet the noise to listen. It's such a waste if we don't do that. It's such a waste because it's all there and it's so far beyond what you can do on your own. This is what I have learned.
I'm going to ask Kenny to say something about that as well, because I think that you talk a lot about the ways that professional musicians or student musicians can distract themselves that seem productive at the moment, but may actually be counterproductive.
Well, first of all, I was just answering the question for myself, and I know Alex, he was in my classes too, and he's a brilliant guy, and it's a great question. I find that my mind doesn't quiet down unless I focus down on one thing I want to work on. And instead of having things looking at me in a panoramic view, I have everything behind that one thing. So I only have this one thing to do, then I can get up off the couch. And when it's done, I remove that, oh, now I'm doing this. And I also am not in a hurry to get to the next thing. That's really important too, because normally when you're practicing one thing, you're multitasking even though you're practicing only one thing. You're thinking about the other things you have to practice before you finish, or you're thinking about other things you have to do for the day. So you're not even really present for the one thing. And I suffered from this so bad that I knew if I wasn't doing this, I knew it easily because I wasn't practicing at all. And until I could parse it down to, okay, I'm just going to do this and then see where my concentration is after that. Maybe I'll do that, but I'm not thinking about it. I could get functional, So it was a necessity for me, because some people can practice in a completely confused way for 8 hours. So I wasn't burdened with that kind of, energy. I knew when I was practicing the wrong way because I wasn't practicing at all. Because you can skim the surface of a lot of subjects and then you don't notice your playing change. Or you can penetrate one subject and notice the collateral effect on everything you're doing. And I had to find that, because if I didn't find that, I wouldn't practice at all. And I had some great teachers show me that. But in terms of what she talked about is, extending your abilities by surrender. You know, it's a kind of a a paradox. You know, how do you gain power? Surrender. You know, as you surrender, you get the power of the force that you're a part of, and you find it. You know, the same thing happens to the soldier in war. You know, he might have been a dentist, and now he finds himself completely adapted to war because his mind snapped and he had to surrender to the moment. And it happens in every area. You can only go so far in your own energy. You know, in my book I talked about these West African dancers. They would do these circle dances for days until someone just fell, and then they would pull them out and replace them with someone else in the circle. And if it was just in your mind, you know, I know if I'd be saying, you know, geez, my arches are dropping here, you know, after 45 minutes. But if you're not doing it, you can do it all day. You know, that's the thing. And there was another sort of, I'm not a Buddhist or I'm not anything, but there was a beautiful Buddhist saying that I put in my book: do nothing, and nothing shall be left undone. So that's all, you know, if you surrender, you're either a drop on a table and you dry up quickly, or you're a drop in the ocean and you last forever.
Cool. I have one thought about that. Well, I didn't study music. I studied physics. And my heroes were people like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg and Albert Einstein. And all three of them had their most important discoveries, either in Einstein's case, working in a patent office all night, or Heisenberg and Bohr loved to go hiking. So they didn't have their discoveries with a piece of paper in front of them. They did a lot of work that prepared them to have the discovery. But I think that's so true in almost every field that it's, you know, if you can't remember something, which happens more and more to me, you have to look away from it and wait for your mind to go find it, and then it will appear. But if you keep staring at it, it will never appear. So I think as artists, giving yourself permission to not always be productive or to not always have a plan, giving yourself the white space where you're not distracted by Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and news and all the horrible things happening in the world, which are truly horrible. But you also have to say, what am I going to do about it? And how can I make a contribution today that will be healthy for me and ultimately something good for the world? I think, unfortunately, we've convinced ourselves that posting a thought on Facebook is changing the world, and it's not. I hate to tell you, it's not. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having opinions and sharing them, but doing something to make the world better or to make yourself a better person, I think, is a far more productive way to use your time. So, Chandrika, did you want to ask if people have some thoughts?
So,
Yeah.
And I promise to be very brief. What blesses me tremendously is two things. Is to remind myself what is the motivation that is nurturing, what is the intentionality of what I want to do. And number two, literally to go to that place of very high one-pointedness. To really, really, really focus on that you want to achieve. Many times it's be still and let it happen. Sometimes it's working very hard. You don't get it, let it go, it will come to you. So literally that's what I've done. And in my case, it has worked tremendously.
So, to get it away from all of us, to you all. So, I just want to stand up for a second. Sorry, it's my phone, don't worry about this. Something I should lose based on this discussion. 7 words or less. And I'd like most people to participate. 7 words or less. What is the whole topic today is global influences on creativity. That's what we're trying to get to. 7 words or less. What are your creative inspirations? What brings you, what are the most important things? What makes you creative? What are your brilliant, radiant moments of creativity? What do you attribute it to? No long sentences. 5 words better, 3 words even better. 7's fine. 7's a limit. Okay, go. This is rapid fire. Running. Anyone else? This is not a call, but I will call on everybody. Love? Okay. Love and power. Sorry?
All right.
Love. That's the ultimate energy. Universe is love. There's nothing beyond.
Finding happiness.
Energy exchange with others.
Speak up your words. We want to all learn from it. We all want to share. This is the beginning of a conversation.
Make a difference.
The emotional lift.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Fear less, love more.
Fear less, love more.
Excuses be gone.
Trying to explain things I have no control over. Help me.
Well, that was eloquent. Well, that was somehow. Anyone else?
It's to inspire. To inspire.
To inspire.
To heal.
Heal.
Flow.
Flow. What else? That
Healing, music, inspiration, transcendence, equanimity.
healing, music, transcendence, equanimity, and
Healing.
Ready?
Chords and melodies. Chords and melodies.
Chords and melodies. Marcus.
Deadlines.
Marcus, a very Eastern European approach. Deadlines. No, brilliant. Okay. No, that too. It's very, very critical.
Service. Life story not being forgotten.
Paint the invisible.
Contribution and a 2.5-year-old daughter.
Listening to silence.
Love to live and live to love.
Observe, study, and participate.
When I'm tired, I shut my mind on professional things, so I'm not worried. Super creative.
Louder, louder.
When I'm tired, I decide not to work, and then I become super creative on everything. I close on the tactics, and then I just want to let it go.
Honesty.
Honesty. Anyone say?
Acceptance.
Trust my intuition.
Cultivating self-trust.
Anyone else? The last words of the, yes.
Serving coffee to Berkeley graduates.
Well, it's good. You've got different, but love was such a big theme. There were some very good common themes to this. So thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful.
Are you going to play one more piece?
Yeah, but just
Okay.
end it with that.
Okay, so I'm going to share one thought to end this, and then we'll truly have the end with another piece of music, and then we invite you to stay and continue socializing for a while. So early in my life, when I grew up in this little town, I discovered Judaism, and I had this intense envy of Jewish people, and I wanted to be Jewish. Then I realized Jews make it kind of hard to convert. And I kind of got over that, and then it shifted to India and Indian culture, and so I had this passion for Indian culture, and I became very fond of Rabindranath Tagore, the great Bengali playwright and poet. And Tagore has this one thing he says that I find so meaningful that I want to leave you with before the music. He said, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and realized life is duty. I made myself of service, and I realized that duty can be joy." Pretty good, huh? Pretty good. Okay, let's have one more piece of music, and then we'll get a chance to catch up.
Right, so this last piece is the Song of Blessings, and I want to really play this. I'm not going to play the full song again, just 2 minutes of it. What it says is that Sarva Mangalam Bhavatu Bhavatu Bhavatu. Let there be blessings for all. Let it be, let it be, let it be. And it says, let the earth be blessed. Let all of us be blessed. Let your body be blessed. Let my body be blessed. Let our souls be blessed. Let the moon be blessed. Let the sun be blessed. Let the planet be blessed. Let the waters be blessed. And then we married that with the Soweto Gospel Choir's ancestral blessings. And so that's what comes together. And then I wrote some English words which says, let's all find Shivoham, which is that state of joy. And that's what that song is. That's the final song of the whole album. So with that, you don't have to even sit to listen to it. We'll just play it a little bit just so you can hear it. And then that's the final of the album. Thanks so much for listening to it all.